Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're going to do something that might seem a little counterintuitive. We're going to look at a stack of old papers.
Right.
And I don't mean, secret government documents. I mean a newspaper, specifically the Arizona Miner.
Oh, boy. I could just feel the listeners' eyes glazing over already. The Arizona Miner. It sounds like a newsletter you'd find in a dentist's office in, 1950.
Exactly. It sounds like some dusty old business ledger. You expect to open it up and see, I don't know, the price of copper, a list of cattle brands, and a weather report that just says hot.
Right.
But
Yeah.
once I actually started digging into the source material you sent over,
Right.
wow, this is not a story about accounting.
Not even close.
This is a story about, well, it's about journalism, sure, but it's journalism with a rifle strapped to your back. It's about printing the news while your office is literally a military target.
It really reframes the whole idea of freedom of the press, doesn't it?
Yeah.
We think of that legally, publishing without censorship. But in the Arizona Territory in the 1860s, the challenge wasn't legal. It was physical. The infrastructure wasn't servers and fiber optics. It was a wagon, a mule, and a whole lot of gunpowder.
So that is the mission for this deep dive. We're going to track the life of this newspaper, the oldest one in Arizona, founded way back in 1864. We're going to follow it from its birth in a military fort all the way to its death during the Great Depression.
And we're using it as a lens. Because if you want to understand how the American West was actually settled, not the movie version, but the gritty logistical reality, you have to look at how they moved information.
And honestly, reading about the working conditions these reporters dealt with, it makes my complaints about slow office Wi-Fi feel pretty embarrassing.
It definitely puts the modern media landscape into a very, very sharp perspective.
So let's rewind. We are dropping into 1864. So the Civil War is still raging back east. Arizona has just been carved out as a territory. It's wild, it's dangerous, and it's politically chaotic. And into this mess walks a guy named Richard C. McCormick.
Richard C. McCormick. He was the Territorial Secretary.
Yeah.
So essentially one of the guys in charge of setting up the new government.
And he decides that this territory needs a voice. It needs a newspaper. But here's the problem. You are in the middle of nowhere. You can't just order a printing press on Amazon.
Far from it, no.
Yeah.
McCormick has to physically go get the means of production. He travels to Santa Fe, New Mexico. He buys a press, and this is probably a heavy cast iron Washington hand press. I mean, we're talking hundreds of pounds of dead weight.
And he has to haul it all the way to Arizona.
Right, and the source material paints this incredible picture. He loads this heavy industrial machine into government wagons, and it's sitting right there alongside his personal belongings.
His personal belongings.
His chairs, his clothes, his desk.
I love that image. It's the ultimate road trip from hell. You're hauling a printing press across the desert over these non-existent roads. If a wheel breaks, the government, loses its voice.
Exactly, and this gets to a crucial point about why he was doing it. McCormick didn't start the paper just to report the weather. Historians call the paper the creature of the new territorial government.
So it was a tool.
It was about legitimacy. If you have a newspaper, you have a government, you have civilization. It proves to the world and to D.C. that this territory is organized.
So they haul this thing all the way, but they don't set up in a nice downtown office.
No. The first issue, which hits the streets on March 9th, 1864, isn't published in a town. It's published at Fort Whipple.
A military fort.
A military fort. And that is not a coincidence. This wasn't a commercial enterprise. It was published under explicit military protection.
The sources you sent had a quote that it stuck with me. It said the staff worked with rifles strapped to their backs.
It's a vivid detail, isn't it?
It's cinematic. I mean, imagine the scene. You're a typesetter. You're standing there picking out these tiny little lead letters, ARI. And the whole time you have a loaded weapon on your body because you were literally working in a conflict zone.
It's a fascinating tension.
Yeah.
You're doing this very intellectual, civilized act writing, editing, while being prepared for immediate violence.
Wow.
The press was the only thing connecting them to the world, but the environment was actively hostile.
It's civilization as an act of defiance. We are going to print this paper, even if we have to shoot our way out of the office.
Precisely. Now, they didn't stay at the fort for long. The government moved the capital to Prescott.
Right. After just 6 issues, the paper follows.
The whole circus wagons, press type cases moves to Prescott, the new capital.
So they're in a town now. You'd think, okay, maybe things can relax a little bit. Maybe take the rifles off.
You would hope so.
Yeah.
But the move didn't mean safety. In fact, this brings us to one of the most tragic figures in the paper's history. a young man named Emmett A. Bentley.
This part of the timeline really shook me because we talk about risk in business, but this is just a different universe of risk.
Bentley became the editor in July 1866. He was young, born in Iowa, came out west in '63. By the time he's running the paper, he's in his mid-20s. He's the voice of the town.
So a young guy, ambitious, running the biggest media outlet in the territory, and then, February 1867, he goes out to Weaver Mountain.
And this is where the reality of the era just crashes right into the story. This was the height of the Apache Wars. Bentley was attacked on the mountain. He was shot.
But he didn't die there.
No. And this is the detail that is so haunting. He was wounded, probably gravely. He was brought back to Prescott. He survived for a few days. And the historical records state he died inside the newspaper's office.
He was only 27 years old, dying in the newsroom.
It's just a stark reminder. We often think of journalists as observers, the person on the sidelines taking notes.
The impartial observer, right?
Exactly. But in the Arizona Territory, the journalists weren't observers. They were participants. They were living and dying right alongside the miners and soldiers they were writing about.
It just changes how you read the headlines from that era. The person writing the copy was literally bleeding for the paper.
It does. And it explains why the tone of the journalism was so different. The miner wasn't objective. It couldn't be. It was fighting for its own survival.
Which brings us to the next big phase. If the physical danger wasn't enough, the political danger starts to ramp up.
Right. So the paper changes hands in 1867. McCormick, the government founder, sells it to a man named John H. Marion.
And this is a huge pivot point. If McCormick was the establishment, Marion was something else.
Something else is a polite way to put it. Marion was a firebrand.
Okay, let's unpack Marion, because his bio in the notes, he sounds like a character out of a movie.
He was from New Orleans. He came west to prospect for gold and silver, which is why the name miner fit him so well. But he realized the real power wasn't in the ground, it was in the printing press.
Now, under McCormick, the paper had been pretty tame, right? Standard government announcements.
Relatively, yeah. It leaned Republican because it was an organ of the federally appointed government. It covered the legislature, Lincoln's re-election.
Yeah.
It was trying to be respectable.
Mm-hmm.
Although, to be fair, McCormick did have his critics. Chief Justice William F. Turner accused him of using the paper for personal gain.
Of course. Corruption in the media, not a new complaint.
Not at all. But then Marion takes over, and he just cranks the volume up to 11. Marion was a Democrat, and he was combative. He saw the paper as a political weapon.
And we have to talk about the actual language he used, because it's important we share this, not to endorse it, obviously, but just to understand the mindset of 1867 Arizona.
We have to look at the historical record impartially. Marion branded the miner with two slogans. The first was the official paper of Arizona, standard stuff.
Okay.
But the second one was the organ of the white people of Arizona.
Wow. He put it right on a masthead.
He did. And that tells you everything you need to know about the political and racial climate of the frontier. It was intensely polarized. He wasn't trying to be inclusive. He was explicitly catering to a specific demographic.
The sources describe his writing as racist and aggressive.
He was relentless.
Wow.
He used the paper to launch just biting attacks on his enemies.
Now, in modern business, you'd think alienating a huge chunk of people is a bad strategy. But what happened to the miners' business under Marion?
It boomed.
Of course it did.
Controversy sells. Anger engages.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lesson the media learned very early on. Marion claims that he grew circulation from less than 75 readers to 672.
That's almost a 10 times increase.
It is. And the advertising grew significantly from half a column to several columns of paid ads.
So he basically invented the rage bait engagement model in 1867.
You could absolutely say that. He proved that a strong, polarizing voice was often more commercially viable than a dry, government-approved one. He turned the miner into a real business.
But of course, nothing lasts forever. The pendulum eventually swings back.
Always does. In 1877, Marion sold the paper to a man named Charles W. Beach. And just like that, the editorial stance flipped right back to its Republican roots.
It's amazing how fast the truth changes depending on who's signing the checks.
Mm-hmm.
It's like watching a cable news channel change ownership today. Suddenly the narrative just flips 180 degrees.
It's not a new phenomenon. The media landscape has always been subject to the whims of ownership.
Speaking of whims, we need to talk about the branding, because if I was a subscriber to this paper, I think I would have had a migraine trying to figure out what it was even called.
The branding strategy was fluid.
Fluid is very generous. I was looking at the list of name changes. It's like they were having an identity crisis every 6 months.
It certainly looks that way from the outside.
Okay, walk me through this. It starts as the Republican Fort Whipple, Arizona Miner.
Right. That was the monthly version at the Fort. Very descriptive.
Then it becomes just the Arizona Miner. Then suddenly it's the weekly Arizona Miner.
That was in 1868.
But then they just swap the words. It becomes the Arizona Weekly Miner.
Which, to a librarian, is a totally different publication.
And then, just to be fancy, they add a the. The Weekly Arizona Miner.
Very dignified.
And eventually becomes the Arizona Weekly Journal Miner. Was this just indecision? Was there no marketing department saying, hey guys, let's maybe pick a lane?
It seems comical, but there was usually a business logic behind it. For example, the switch to weekly. When a guy named Benjamin H. Weaver joined, they suddenly had the resources, the manpower, to publish weekly instead of semi-monthly.
Okay, so that's a huge change in workflow.
It is. You have to produce twice as much content.
Yeah.
So changing the name to weekly wasn't just a tweak. It was a flex. It was bragging to advertisers. Look how capable we are now.
So the name change was a signal of growth.
Exactly. And we should forget there was actually a daily edition for a while, too.
An Arizona Daily Miner.
Yep, from about 1873 to 1885.
Wow. Imagine printing a daily paper, hand-setting the type, in a mining town in the 1870s. The pressure must have been immense.
It was a bustling operation. But that constant change in names also signaled instability. Mergers, new partners, new owners. Every time the money changed, the name on the door changed.
So, we've survived attacks, we've survived political mudslinging, and we've survived a branding crisis. But we haven't talked about the one thing that seems to happen to every wooden building in the Old West.
Fire.
The Great Leveler.
It's almost inevitable in these histories. On July 14th, 1900, disaster struck. The publishing office was completely destroyed.
And we need to clarify what destroyed means in 1900. There's no cloud backup, no Google Drive.
No. If the office burns, the history burns.
The archives, the back issues, the lists.
And the physical capital, the presses, the typecases, all of it melted or turned to ash. It's a total loss. For most businesses, that is the end.
But they didn't fold.
No. And this speaks to the sheer resilience of the organization. They scrambled. They published a temporary daily edition for about a month, probably on a borrowed press, just to keep the news flowing.
That is dedication. Our building is ash, but here's the news.
And then they moved into a small brick building on West Gurley Street.
Brick being the key word there. We're not doing the wood thing again.
Exactly. And this period, post-fire, really marks the transition into the modern era. We leave the frontier phase and enter the industrial phase.
What was the big leap?
Technology. In 1904, they get the linotype machine.
Okay, for those of us who aren't print nerds, explain why the linotype is such a huge deal.
So, before this, every single letter, every E, every comma, had to be picked by hand from a box and lined up. It was incredibly slow.
Painstaking.
The linotype changed everything. It was a machine with a keyboard. You type a line of text, and the machine melts lead and casts a solid linotype right there.
So it's the difference between handwriting a letter and typing an email.
It's a massive leap in efficiency. It'll let them print more pages, faster, with fewer people, and around then, they also became a franchise of the Associated Press.
That's a huge shift in content. Now they're not just relying on rumors from wagons, they're plugged into the national wire.
They're part of the global network, getting news from New York, London, Washington almost instantly.
By 1914.
By 1914, they've moved into a two-story building with a Goss web perfecting press.
Web perfecting? Sounds fancy. What's that?
It's the grandfather of the modern newspaper press. Instead of feeding single sheets of paper by hand, a web press takes a giant roll of paper, feeds it through continuously, and prints on both sides at once.
So we are talking about speed.
Serious industrial speed. We are a long, long way from Richard McCormick hauling a hand press across the desert. We are now in the age of mass media.
It's a complete evolution, from a fort to a factory.
Basically, yes. But all things come to an end.
Sadly, yes. The miner, or the journal miner as it was known by then, finally reached the end of the line.
April 1934.
Now, the source notes don't explicitly say the Great Depression killed the paper, but the date is 1934.
It's hard to ignore the context. 1934 was the absolute depth of the Depression. Advertising revenue had plummeted, mines were closing, people just didn't have money for subscriptions. It's very likely the economy finally caught up with them.
So after 70 years, the press has stopped.
It's quite a run, though. Think about the arc. It started before the Civil War ended, born in a wagon, protected by soldiers.
It survived the Apache Wars. It saw the territory become a state.
It fueled political fires. It burned down and rose from the ashes. and it eventually hooked up to the global information network.
It really is the story of Arizona in a nutshell.
It is. It's the story of how a rough, violent frontier transformed into a structured, modern society. And the newspaper was the diary of that entire life.
You know, it makes me think. We live in this age where news is instant. My phone buzzes, and I know what happened 5 seconds ago on the other side of the world. And honestly, I swipe it away half the time. I take it for granted.
We all do. It's low-cost information. It's everywhere.
Exactly. But when you look at the Arizona miner, the cost of that information was incredibly high. People risked their lives, literally died, to get those words on a page.
It raises a fascinating question about value. Does the ease of access devalue the information? When Emmett Bentley died to get the paper out, that paper meant something profound to the community. It was a lifeline.
That is the thought I want to leave you with today. Next time you get a news alert and you're annoyed by the distraction, just take a second. Imagine the guy with the rifle strapped to his back or the editor dying in his office just so the community could know what was going on. Would we value our news differently if we remembered the price that used to be paid for it?
It's certainly something to think about.
Thanks for diving in with us. We'll see you next time.